Hello, everyone, and welcome to 38 Parallel. In this second episode today, we will try to discover the Korean Peninsula in much broader perspective. And specifically in this episode today, we are going to discuss and interview professor about the importance of the Christianity in North Korea, how Christianity arrived in the Korean Peninsula, specifically how it arrived in North Korea. We know the North Korea of course, is one of the most important country in the world that people try to understand because they have different style of the worldview, they different style of the governance systems than the Western countries, and always people try to understand this country. But now we added another layer of curiosity. The Christianity is one of the world in terms of population most powerful religion I think in the world with 2.5 billion population around the world. And we are talking about the Pyongyang specifically. In the early 1900s, Pyongyang was one of the center of the Christianity. If I'm wrong, maybe Professor Tim later will correct me. And there is a name calling the Jerusalem of the East for Pyongyang. I think this is the much important part of the story. How the missionary come to this country, this region, because of course we are talking about the before the division of the Korean Peninsula between the south and north. And just I heard some amazing stories. People in the region, they send their kids from Tokyo, from Shanghai for education to Pyongyang for educations in the missionary academy or schools. And the time, some sources calling that, arguing that the 5 of 1 or 2 of 5 of the population were the Christian missionary. But another amazing things you will during these conversations, I think you will see something that you will never heard before in anywhere. The first thing striking me when we talk, I thought about the Christianity and North Korea. I thought maybe the Christianity entered the North Korea or the Korean Peninsula from somewhere east, from Europe, from Russia, from China. But in contrary, majority maybe the missionary come from the United States. And by the maybe 1920 or in the early 1900, the Pyongyang one of the epicenter of the Christianity in East Asia. And for much time, much knowledgeable to give space to my much knowledgeable friends, I will pass the Grace. She will introduce the professor. Grace, please, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. So, yeah, before the introduction of professor, so first, I would like to briefly reflect on our first live stream. During that discussion, we talking about how understanding history is essential for understanding the geopolitics of the Korean Peninsula today. We also touch on the Korean, the role of the Christianity in Korean history and how religion has influenced the social and political development on the peninsula. Today, we would like to explore that topic in greater depth. Rather than focus on the contemporary issue, we will examine the historical foundation that helped shape modern Korea and North Korea. We will trace the origin of the Christianity in Korea, explore why Pyongyang was once known as a Jerusalem of the East, and discuss how Christianity intersected with nationalism, the independence movement, Japanese colonial rule, the division of the Korea, and the Korean War. By examining this historical background, we can better understand how religion, ideology, and politics become intertwined and how these factors continue to influence North Korea and the regional geopolitics today. So today, we have a special guest. I am honored to welcome the Professor Tim Chan, a Korean-American educator in the Global Study Program at the Liberty University's Theological Seminary. Professor Chan brings both academic expertise and first-hand field experiences to today's discussion. As a global worker in the Northeast China, He has worked closely with North communities, gaining the unique insights into the cultural, historical, and the religious reality that shaped the life of the North Korean beyond the headlines. His work highlights the importance of the cross-cultural understanding, Christian ministry, and the compassionate engagement with the marginalized community, drawing from his experience in both education and international ministry. He offers a variable perspectives on the historical roots of Christianity in Korea, the transformation of the religious life in North Korea, and the complex relationship between faith, ideology, and geopolitics in Northeast Asia. We are grateful to have him join us today as we explore the untold story of Christianity in North Korea and its significance for understanding the region's past and the present. Please join me welcoming Professor Cham.
Welcome, Professor Chang.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great to have you with us.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, before we start in the discussions, many people actually think of North Korea primarily in terms of the nuclear issues, like security challenges and international politics. But our focus is a history today. So, and in the history, the story of the Christianity is often overlooked. So this is actually first question for you, or if you have an additional introduction of yourself, please be free to share about your experiences. But this is my first question for you to start this conversation. Why do you think understanding the religious history of Korea is important for understanding the geopolitics of the Korean Peninsula today?
Yeah, so to go ahead and say that on a sort of a larger window, if you want to understand human history, you can't do that separate from what God is doing in the world. Mm-hmm. So religion has been foundational for humanity throughout, all of our civilization. And so the idea that atheism, there's that atheism, no God, only became really popular in the last 200 years. So, I mean, I don't know how old you think the Earth is and how long we've been here, but most of human history, we've always thought there's God. There's no question there's God. And so atheism is sort of a popular idea and then that's sort of couched in secularism because it's saying that there is no God. And then we as humans, we ourselves going to make everything happen. And so the divide between that is called modernity versus post-modernity. And so you're looking at end of modernity in the 1800s. And then when you shift into the 1900s, especially with World War I and World War II, you move into post-modernity. And so we're right now in post-modernity, and most people now are open to religion in post-modernity. And so this is sort of the larger picture of religion, God, and human history. Specifically for Korea, Christianity was, and I'm going to relate, and I want us to talk, if we can sort of shift our conversation even towards Joseon An Chang-ho. And a lot of people know him as a freedom fighter, a national hero. He's definitely probably one of the most beloved, if not the most beloved Korean patriot from both the North and the South. Everybody loves Joseon An Chang-ho because of the life he lived. And same thing for him. Most people don't understand the role of Christianity in his life and how central that was. And his life is between the 1800s to the 1900s. And he's actually martyred in 1938 because of his faith under the Japanese occupation. And so, especially for Korea, the role of Christianity. And so Lockman mentioned this a moment ago. And most people are like, what do you mean Pyongyang was Jerusalem of the East? That's crazy. So the reason it was called the Jerusalem of the East, and that's in the early 1900s. Just keep that in mind, early 1900s. So as Christianity is spreading globally, especially Protestant Christianity is spreading globally in the 1800s, and so Christianity moved into there's no South Korea, North Korea, by the way, at this time. And so into Korea in the late 1800s in a very strong way, Protestant Christianity. And more than any country in Asia, it was the most receptive to Christianity. And so that's an interesting conversation to have. A lot more than China. So Western missionaries first went to like China and Japan. Those were the major countries they went to. But they weren't as receptive as Korea. And then in 1907, there was the Pyongyang revival. And so with the Pyongyang revival, it was phenomenal. Pyongyang is the capital of North Korea today. Again, there's no North Korea, South Korea at that time. There's only one Korea. And Koreans were so desperate for God. And the main reason, and so a lot of people, when they think about Christianity as a Western religion, Christianity as maybe a part of like a force of oppression from the West, but for the Koreans, it was actually the opposite. It was the Japanese who had occupied Korea, and they were the force of oppression for them. And Christianity was a force of liberation. And so I'll share this with you. Then we can do, because I like y'all's format of wanting to do like conversation. But Billy Graham is probably the most famous evangelist of modern time. Billy Graham, who spoke to hundreds of millions of people. Billy Graham. Now, Billy Graham, his wife is Ruth Graham. So Billy Graham's wife, Ruth Graham, before they were married, Ruth Graham's parents were missionaries in China. And so when their parents wanted them to have missionary education for their children, they sent Ruth Graham to Pyongyang. And so she had her high school missionary education in Pyongyang before she went to the United States to get her college education. So missionaries, not just from Korea, but around Asia, were sending their kids to Pyongyang because that's the most Christian part of Asia. And so we can talk about this more, but Pyongyang, most Christians were in Pyongyang, around Pyongyang, and because that was the center, and then you have Korean Christians in different places. But so I'll leave it right there for y'all.
And Grace, if you have some questions, please go ahead. If you don't, I can ask some questions to Professor.
Okay. Okay. So my question is how did the Japanese colonial rule affect the Christian community in Korea? Also, were Christians seen primarily as religious believers, or did they also play a role in Korean nationalism?
Yeah. So you want to look at the relationship between Japan and Korea, and then the role of Christianity. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
But Professor, I will add something to the Grace.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of the show, as I mentioned, the Jerusalem of the East. This is one of the most powerful terms I heard in my entire education life, because in this part of the world, the Jerusalem has been only conquered by the most powerful men, like Saladin, like other important figures in the history. Only they are able to conquer this most powerful part of the world, this most powerful the city. And now I heard that there is another comparison, the Pyongyang, like the Jerusalem of the East. Do you think that there is, what kind of comparison, physical or theoretical comparison we can do between the Jerusalem today? And today, even, the Jerusalem is governed by the Israel, and Israel seems to one of the most powerful country in the world. And today, Pyongyang also gone by. Of course, this is the contemporary history. Just I want to make the comparison between the city, and I wonder. We were talking about, you told about the revival of Christianity in the Pyongyang. You started in the 1900. I wonder if there is a prehistory of Christianity, like in 1800 or 11th century. Is there any background of the Christianity in the Korean Peninsula?
Yeah. So I think this is
What is
related
exactly
to
what is the starting
right.
starting point?
And I think this is related to Grace's question too, because Korea, in terms of their own sovereignty, they were going downhill very, very fast. So the world is rapidly changing in the late 1800s. Like you talk about geopolitics. And so now the West they have a lot of interest in East Asia. And then now we're going to focus on small Korea compared to China and Japan. So there's China and Japan. China is the most major player in that part, East Asia. Then there's Japan, and then there's small Korea. So they call it the hermit nation, because South Korea did not want to have this relationship with the West. Their desire was to keep doing what they've done for thousands of years or hundreds of years, and that is to keep relating with China, and China as their big brother. Now, just the historical context is that there was a war between China and Japan for Korea, in Korea. And that was fought, and I want to make sure I get this correct, okay? So that was fought 1894 to 1895. So, and at this time, this gets a little bit complicated, because at that time, China represents the old tradition, and then the old ways, and Japan represents the new ways. They're on the progressive side, because they're understanding what the West is doing, and they're partnering with the West. And Korea is not really a player in this whole thing. And so what happens, and there's some reason why these two countries in it, but those are smaller reasons. The biggest reason they're in Korea is because they want Korea. They're not trying to protect Korea; they want Korea. They say they're trying to protect Korea and help Korea, and bring stability. That's not that's false. Okay, and so they're in Korea, and what happens is that Japan beats China, and so now Japan has this right over Korea. Traditionally, historically, it's been China predominantly that had right over Korea. And then I'm just going to fast forward this, okay? Because 10 years later, there's going to be another war. And that's going to be 1904 to 1905. Japan fights with Russia in Korea for Korea. And so whoever wins gets their prize is Korea. And so who's going to win? Japan. It's amazing. And so this is like the first time in modern warfare that a Japanese country or Asian country beats a European country. And so, like, this is sort of a shocker. It's like, it's like a David and Goliath. How did David win? It's amazing. Now, the whole time in this, who are the victims? It's the Korean people. Korean people, like, we didn't ask you to come to our country and fight. We didn't ask for your protection. We didn't ask you for your ideas. We didn't ask for you to come and rule over us. But Korea was too weak to protect themselves. So their main enemy was not the West. Well, maybe partly West if you think about Russia, being part of Eastern Europe. But now that Japan has this dominance over Korea, in 1905, they have what's called a Protector Treaty that allows them legally to, let's say, own Korea. It's like buying a house, and saying, I bought this house, and I bought this house with this much money, so it's my house. That's what Japan is saying about Korea. And the Koreans are devastated. So some of the Koreans were actually working with Japan, even some of our independent fighters, because they wanted to be a progressive country like Japan. But they didn't want to come under Japan. And then we're going to jump 5 more years later, and this will give you the larger context. They have what's called the Annexation Treaty. And now they take over Korea. There's no more Korea in 1910. This is unthinkable for the Koreans. And therefore, what's going to happen? Koreans are now outraged. They're like, we've been around for thousands of years, and Japan gets to have all of Korea. And so Christianity for them, for many Korean Christians, for them, it wasn't just like, okay, I believe God, I'm going to heaven, great. That's too simple. For Koreans, when they were becoming Christians, it's like fighting against the Japanese. Because the Japanese were not a Christian nation. In fact, in Japan, there's a history of like the Japanese persecuting Christians in Japan. And their religion of Shintoism is very strong. And that's what they try to make Korean Christians do. Deny Christianity and take on Shintoism, Japanese religion. And so, again, I can go into a little more context of the revival, and then maybe I'll hand it back over to you guys. But in 1907, when Koreans were learning all these Christian principles, it was driving them crazy. It's like, the Bible teaches us to love our enemies. And they're like, how do we do that? These Japanese people are making it terrible for our country. That government is, in their eyes, evil. And also, the media tension was between Koreans, Christians, and the missionaries, the Western missionaries. They had some antipathy towards Western missionaries, because they felt like Western missionaries were looking down on the Korean Christians, and there was some tension because of that. And so in 1907, when the revival broke out, this is in January, when the revival broke out, Korean Christians were repenting of their problems they had with Western missionaries, but then they were also repenting what? Because they could not love the Japanese. That's the immediate context. And that's how Christianity starts exploding out of Jerusalem. And that's why, and I want to go back to this, okay? So how did you're talking about, Lockman was talking about how different forces came to conquer Jerusalem. So when you think about the force that conquered Jerusalem, here in this context, it really is love for our brothers and sisters, even our enemies. It's crazy. And I think that is the most powerful force.
Professor, just I wonder, there is some reason when some countries being occupied or conquered by external forces. For example, in modern time, when we're talking about some like Iraq, Libya, and other countries, these countries were occupied mostly because they have oil. The Jerusalem through the history has been occupied because they have had a religion's importance by major 3 religions like Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. But what is the importance of the Korean Peninsula that in terms of comparison with the Jerusalem, and during that time, the revival of the Christianity in the Korean Peninsula, what was the importance of the Korean Peninsula or the northern side that became the field of clash or competition between the regional and great powers like Russia, like Japan, like China, and later US also involved? And Grace, what, do you have any comment and question? Please add.
I think from my understanding, like I would like you to like provide something information about the relationship between Christianity and the Kim Il-sung, the first leader of North Korea, and his family background and roots was Christianity. Yeah, that's I think interesting story for audience as well. So that's my question.
Okay, so you're asking, I get Grace's question because that's, I mean, I love to address that because, Christianity and specifically North Korea. Lockman, are you thinking about the strategic location of Korea?
Yes, of course, strategic locations, and plus we were talking about a time that Christianity is most powerful time in Pyongyang and became the epicenter even by I think early 20th century or the early 1900s. Pyongyang had more than church per capita than any other city in East Asia, like Shanghai, Beijing, or Tokyo, or Hiroshima, and other places. I wonder this growing the religious importance and religious powers give some reasons to external power to occupy the Korean Peninsula.
Okay, so I'm going to tie these questions together. Okay, I'm going to tie it together because you guys are looking at the span about 40 years different. Okay, so early 1900s is you have the Pyongyang revival, 1907, and then you have Korea divided in 1945, and then you have Kim Il-sung coming to power, and then Kim Il-sung slowly bringing communism 100% into what we now know as North Korea. So, in Christianity plays a huge role in all this. And so Japan is very, very smart as a government. And so Japan does not outlaw Christianity at the beginning in Korea because they know that most of the West are Christians and they don't want to build enemies with, let's say, for example, USA or England, these Christian nations. They need their support. And they actually have bridged that political support before they took over Korea, just to let you know. Okay. Now, when they saw Christianity growing in the early 1900s, Japanese let it happen. Remember, annexation meant that there is no more Korea. It's under Japan. So Christianity grew under the Japanese rule. So Japan could say geopolitically, like, hey, we're a country of freedom of religion. We're for Shintoism, but Koreans want Christianity. We let them have it, And so politically, they're doing the right things. But what happens is that, I mean, I can't cover all parts of Korean history, but what happens is that, especially when you get to the early 1930s, and definitely by the late 1930s, the Japanese government becomes very aggressive. And they start to really kick out missionaries now. And they are forcing every Korean to bow to Shintoism. And there's a famous Korean, her name is Anisuk. An, A-H-N-E-Suk. And in her English name is Esther An. And so there's a book called Jugumun Jugula. So if I perish, let me perish, I perish, right? And it's a book about Anisuk, her story, and she's a Christian. She and an elder. This is in the 1930s, during that window that I'm talking about, when they're forcing the Korean, every Korean to bow to Shintoism, the Japanese religion. She and an elder went to Japan and told them how what they were doing was illegal. You cannot force the Koreans to do this. Well, her story has turned into a movie. I mean, she has a book, and then the Japanese Christians turn her movie into her book into a movie because it's a great story. And so the Japanese, what they did to Korea was really, really, I mean, it was horrible throughout their occupation, but it got really bad in the 1930s. And so in 1945, August the 15th, and so all Koreans know this, ready? And they know it in 3 numbers, 815. 8 is for August, 15 is the 15th, and that's for 1945 when Japan left Korea after 40 years of occupation. Now, some people want to say 35 years. They start from the annexation. I don't start from the annexation. I start from the Protectorate Treaty in 1905. 1905 to 1945 is 40 years. And Koreans were like, finally, we're free. But then what happened? USA and Russia, they split Korea. Technically, they actually did it before 815. Oh, but I want to tell you one more thing. This is an amazing part of the Korean Christian history. This is because I know that we're talking the bigger background would be just Korean history, but specifically looking at Korean Christian history. A lot of Korean Christians were praying when the Japanese were just bringing this kind of unbearable torture on the Korean people. Many dying for their faith, and they were actually going to execute. Listen to this, ready? Hundreds of Korean Christian leaders on August 15, 1945. But what happened? The opposite happened. Instead of executing Korean Christians, what happened? Koreans had to leave. Japanese had to leave Korea. Now, I'm going to connect this to Kim Il-sung, okay, and his family. Because Kim Il-sung's family, they were, and I've been to North Korea 3 times. And so one of the famous places you go when you go to North Korea is you see where Kim Il-sung grew up. And Kim Il-sung grew up very close to the middle of the city of Pyongyang today. And so Kim Il-sung's family was very, very Christian because their parents and their family members were touched by the missionaries. And so when you go to Pyongyang, Kim Il-sung actually has a church named after his mother. This is crazy. The name of the church is called Pansok Gyoe. Pansok means rock. Gyoe means church. So they have a rock church. And the reason it's called rock church is because his mother is known as Pansok. That's her name. So he named a church after his mother. One of the few government churches in Pyongyang. And so with Kim Il-sung, I think that especially towards the end of his life, I think he really wanted good things for Korea. But the problem was that he was so manipulated and there was so much compromise when he first became the leader. And he wasn't a leader. He was only a figurehead. In 1945, Russia picked him to be a leader for North Korea. In South Korea, they picked their own leader, and that was Lee Seung-man. And initially, I just call him Mr. Kim, Kim Il-sung, or President Kim. He was not making it like super hard in terms of like radically changing Christianity in North Korea. Now we can talk about North Korea versus South Korea. because now, after the 815, it's divided to north with Russia, and south is with USA, and under their supervision. And just to let you know, his age is only early 30s. So in Korean's calculation, early 30 is not an old person. I mean, you're still a young person. And so when they saw Kim Il-sung, when I say the North Koreans first saw Kim Il-sung making a speech, and they're like, he's so young. Who is this young person? But I say that he's a figurehead because he pretty much does whatever Russia wants. And Russia is very smart. So Russia is not going to change, bring communism full on at the very beginning. But year by year, it radically changes. So 1945, especially when you get to 1947, 1948, becomes much stronger communism. And then there's a group called Korean National Federation. Korean National Federation, that's an organization founded in North Korea to support the North Korean government. So it's not a federation. It's not a group to support North Korean Christians or North Korean pastors or churches. It's just the name says it sounds like that, but it's actually, that is a group that is there to support the North Korean government. So one of the debates they had was that when they were doing elections in North Korea, they wanted to hold these elections in churches on Sunday. Christian pastors were dead against that. But if the government wants it, they have to give into it. And so one of the goals of KNA, clear goals of KNA, is to support the government of North Korea under Kim Il-sung. So if the government wants it, we will support it. And so by 1947, 1948, all the Christians, pastors, Christian pastors, all the churches have to join the Korean Christian Federation. There's no choice. Before they had a choice. Now there's no choice. Everybody has to join. So now we're moving into more full-on communism. And then when the war broke out in 1950, the Korean War, and that's the next number you have to remember, 625. Because 625, we had 815, August 15, 1945. Now we have 625. 625 stands for June the 25th. 6 is for June, 25th, 1950. And at that time, what happened? Kim Il-sung attacked South Korea. And now we have 3 years of war. And I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, but mainly he is doing the bidding of Stalin. Kim Il-sung says, I am doing this to unite the fatherland. That's only a slogan. That's not the truth. The truth is Kim Il-sung wants us to attack South Korea. This is now the first hot war in the Cold War between USA and Russia or USSR. The first hot war of the Cold War. And so Christianity, I'm going to end with here, okay? Remember I told you about the Korean Christian Federation? So what happened was that when they enter into the Korean War, when North and South was fighting during the Korean War, North Korea killed, the record says they killed all the pastors that joined the Korean Christian Federation. But probably that's probably hyperbole.
In which year they
What's
killed
that?
the pastor? what was the year when they North
We
Korea
don't have the
killed
exact year for that, but during the Korean War, so that'd be 1950 to 1953.
53?
So during that, because now there's nothing to hide in North Korea. They're not going to go soft communism. So that's what you have. You have at the beginning soft communism, moving to hard communism. In that 5 years during the Korean War, they're full on hard communism. I mean, during the war, if the North comes to the South, they find churches, they're going to burn everything. They're going to burn the pastors. They're going to burn the members. They're just going to kill everybody, especially if you're connected. Because if you're connected to Christianity in the North, you are like the ultimate enemy. I don't care if you're Korean. If you're connected to Christianity, you are connected to USA. Because USA brought the missionaries, and you listen to the missionaries. And so there's all this propaganda in North Korea where missionaries will teach you Christianity and will teach you to be weak because they teach you to love your enemies. And they will make up things like Christianity these missionaries will steal your children and even say things like eat them. It's just like, who does things like that, you know? And so you go completely opposite from Pyongyang, Jerusalem of the East, to now it becomes the hell of the East. It's incredible. Now the real color is showing during the Korean War. Now I'm going to end with this because I don't think they killed all the Christians in North Korea at that time. I don't. They can't. There's too many of them. And so many of them actually survived. Okay. Many, I don't mean many being like majority of them. Many being at least thousands or maybe tens of thousands. They survived, but they had to go underground. And today, if you go to North Korea, again, the main Protestant church you can visit as a foreigner, I visited that church. They actually have children whose parents or grandparents were Christians during that window. And they have them, even though they may not have faith, but they're official tenders of that church because they have that kind of a Protestant connection to the old Christians.
Professor, please let me make a comparison again in history. I'm not sure this is because of the communism effect on the Korean Peninsula, but similar things happened to the other religions across the world. For example, when we come to the Middle East, starting from the 1920 to 1930 and 1950, similar things happened to the Korean Christians, happened to the Muslims in the Middle East and other countries. They have been killed, persecuted, and migrated by the secular governments. Do you think that this is a worldwide trend in that time, or this is what kind of effect of the Cold War or the effect of the communism, or this is a specific time of the history that secularism in rise and open a war toward the religious groups, whether they are the Muslims or they are the Christians?
Yeah, I'm going to address this in a larger picture, okay?
Because Grace, apologize. Maybe I take your turn.
No. I like
no, you're good. No, you're good.
No, I like your question because, you know, I teach on, let's say, for example, I taught Islam for a while. So I have a background in Islam. And also I teach on cultural anthropology. And so one of the things that we talk about in cultural anthropology is religion, okay? Now, I believe that God has made everyone us to be free. And when you understand true religion, you understand that freedom. Okay. Now, the problem with abusive religion is that whether it's Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or other kind of religion, whoever is in control of that area, let's say now we use the word government or that tribe, that would be the old word. They really, what they do is they don't let religion be what it is, giving people freedom, letting people have real choices. But what happens is that a lot of times they say they come in the name of some religion, And then when you see the true colors or their intention is that they have no connection to that religion. They're not, let's say they're not true believers. Instead, what they do is that they're abusing the religion to get what they want. And what they want is total control. And so when you don't do what we want, the end is that we could kill you. If before that, they'll make your life terrible. But if you still don't listen and you still keep being stubborn and do what you want to do, in the name of your religion or name of humanism, we're going to kill you. And so I'm going to connect it to what I know a lot. It's China. That's exactly what happened in China. Under Mao Zedong in China, I recently heard that more people died under Mao than all of World War II. And Mao killed his own people. And a lot of them did not die because Mao went and shot them. Many of them died because they didn't have any food. And and I remember reading this about Mao, and so people talk to Mao and say, "Aren't you concerned that so many of your people are dying? Like tens of millions. Like we're talking like within easily between 40 to 50 million people dying of starvation." And he says that, aren't you concerned that so many people are dying here in China? And Mao would say, "Well, I still have 300 million people." Like, what kind of a thinking is that? That is, I mean, I have a very strong word for that. And like, no, one person is invaluable. Okay. You cannot just have like millions of people die and because you're trying to push let's say your government, because to him, communism was everything. And by the way, Chinese communism is not the same thing as North Korean communism, as similarly as well as Russia Stalin communism, or the communism that is today with Putin. But yeah, I mean, in short, Lockman, what I would say is this, okay? People are abusing religion to get total control. And when you see the true colors of that, you see a lot of people die because of that.
Is it someone's like a voice? Someone's like something reflecting the voice? Maybe Lockman?
No. Do you see any
Really?
echo from my side?
Yeah. I can see echo.
Okay, just let me.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I have actually like additional comment about that. I mean, like North Korean communism and Chinese communism are really, really different. But actually, when I am also prospective specialist for North Korean, DPRK and the U.S. relationship. But when I talk to American people, actually, they misunderstand the one fact. China, North Korea is the same communist country. Partially, that is true. But North Korea uses the Chuche ideology, which is more, stirring like Iranianism ideas. And like Maoism is kind of like their presupposition is different. Like Maoism's like more like, revolutions presuppositions is like more, because there's a, peasants and the dynasty, and they have the gaps. And those like a peasant liberation is more presupposition of the Chinese communism. But North Korea, as we discussed today, it's more like a independence from the Japanese colonialism. So as I actually like this kind of the differences, I believe it's really important even making the foreign policies, because ideology is a kind of destiny and actions of the the state. So depend on what kind of communism they have. I think the policy itself, I mean, it has to be something, how to say, adapt about it. So I like, you brought something important perspective, but I also have one additional thoughts about what you're talking about, Christian community in North Korea. So I also work with the North Korean defectors, and I met the different type of the North Korean defectors. But many actually people, my defectors friends, like they become Christians because something on the way of the defection, Christian ministry help them, like you, the Professor Chen did. But like many people actually become Christian after escaping from North Korea. But actually, I work with the human rights NGO in Japan, and my supervisor was actually, she was Christian in North Korea. So what she talking about was like her grandmother, like it's kind of, she doesn't speak about the Bible itself, but like she teaches that something Bible principles, a philosophy, like to the children. That's why she say even there was no Bible, there was no any scriptures in North Korea, but she says she believed in God even since she wasn't in North Korea. That was so interesting for me because like, because now in South Korea, but even in any United States or any Western countries, because we have a Bible, we can read a Bible, we can read the scriptures, and that's why we have a faith. Of course, not for everybody, but like based on the Bible verses, we can believe in God. However, like for the environment of North Korea, it's extremely hard to have even like a fundamental rights to believe, having the faith. However, even during she was in North Korea, but still like she felt it's kind of God presence was there. Like there was no Bible, and I didn't know anything about Bible, but what my grandmother told me was actually Christian, teaching. After she defected from North Korea, actually she read the Bible and she realized that was like a Christian teaching. So that's why, like, she studies a lot about the Bible studies like every day. Like, it was so amazing to know that someone's from, because it's extremely hard for to hear the actual Christians in North Korea, inside of the North Korea, like before the defection. That's why, like, I reminded of the story and how North Korean Christians have a faith in the community. That's my actually like additional thoughts about it. Also, I have a question to the Professor Chan, like because we talking about something ideology of the the North Korea, like I know like some scholars something argue that like more than something situations or geopolitics of North Korea, actually understanding of the ideology is important. And I'm also studying North Korea, and actually within the North Korean ideology, actually there are some similarities with was the Christian, biblical worldview. So like, I think for, audience, I think we can give the insights about it. So, yeah.
So I would say that one, your talk about North Korea communism and China's communism being different, I totally agree with that. That's very good. And so if people want to study communism, they have to contextualize communism to that country. Not only to that country, but they have to also do that within the right time period. So communism early on, middle, and late are not going to be the same either. So you have to do both. Contextualize to the location, contextualize to the time period. So that's very good. Now, as far as like you're talking about the one supervisor that who said that she felt God's presence, and so that's what I was talking to you about earlier about old Christians. So these are old Christians, or Christians whose grandparents or maybe their great grandparents were Christians, and they pass on that faith to their family members, but they have to do it quietly. They can't just bring out a Bible. They can't say Jesus. They can't even put the cross, but instead they just talk about it, let's say much more indirectly. And then there's the new Christians. And so this is part of my research and part of our work. And when we met with North Korean refugees in Northeast China, it was quite eye-awakening for me. Okay, but many people that in they usually started from 1995 to 1998. During those 3 to 4 years, they call it the Great Famine. Or some people in North Korea, they call it the Arduous March. And so during the Great Famine, probably about 10% of the population died during that time. So 10% of the population is a little over 2 million people. And so many North Koreans had to go to China for food. And many North Koreans that came to China for food, they became Christians. Because most of the people that was helping them along the border were Christians. Missionaries, that's what we did. We were missionaries along the border. And also Chinese Christians, especially Korean Chinese Christians. So this is what they would say in North Korea. If you go to China, find a building with a cross. Because if you find a building with a cross, they will help you.
I heard about it.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah.
And so the North Koreans would go find a building with a cross. They would get help. And most North Koreans, when they went from North Korea to China and they got the food they needed, they came back to North Korea. And so, I have a lot of interest in understanding how Christianity is, especially I want to focus on North Korea today, is helping North Korea. And I believe, the North Korean government knows where many of those are, okay? But at the same time, I don't think North Korean government is interested in eliminating all the North Korean Christians. That's not their main interest. They just want to make sure that they don't get too powerful. The North Korean government, they're experts in spying. They're probably one of the best in the world, without a question. They can definitely keep track of their own people, okay? If they can see what's happening in the United States with this one corporation that they really have interest in, I'm sure they can track all their people. And, and people say things like, oh, yeah, like in South Korea, there's many South Koreans. And there's over 30,000 North Koreans living in South Korea. And a lot of the North Koreans in South Korea want to help their families and are helping their families. How do they do that? They send them money.
Yeah.
They talk to them on telephones. Do you not think the North Korean government, do you think that's like so tricky for the North Korean government to figure out that that's happening? They keep tab on all your communication. They keep tab on how much money you have. They know where you're located. The problem, the main thing is that do not disrupt the government. If you stay separated, you stay out in the mountaintops, staying quiet in your catacombs, we're fine with that. Don't come to the city, try to make noise. And so I am interested in because I actually think, I'm hoping that the North Korean government, this would be a miracle, okay? This would be a miracle. But for the North Korean government to see that Christianity is not our enemy. Instead, they find ways of making true inroads with Christianity. And so I know that's a big request, okay? That would be like truly a modern day Moses miracle, okay? But God in the Bible does a lot of miracles, and so we can hope for that. But just going back to North Korean Christianity, again, that group, Korean Christian Federation. By the way, that was ran by Kim Il Sung's grand uncle. Okay, that was run by Kim Il Sung's grand uncle on his mom's side. Okay, and that group is still there, but that group, how do I say this? I would say that they don't represent true Christianity. Okay. The reason I say that is because true Christianity has to follow Jesus Christ. Loving your enemies is not a sign of weakness. It's the opposite. You know, I mean, I'm just going to use a sort of simple analogy and then I can sort of stop here. But Christianity, you know, that's what Jesus said. Jesus said, if someone slaps you on one cheek, give them the other cheek. Someone asks you to walk 1 mile, walk another mile. You know, it's like, so the idea is don't let your enemies conquer you with their requests. Instead, you just love them. It drives them crazy. And that's what Jesus did. Okay. And so Christianity, I mean, I was going to use this analogy. So in my family, I have 3 children, right? And this may sound bad, okay? But sometimes I feel like my wife and my children are my enemies. Because sometimes they completely misunderstand me and they say, but you know, and they say things they shouldn't say. But you know what? I need to apply that principle. Love your enemies. You know, because your enemies are not just someone who's got a gun in front of you and forcing you to do things you don't want. It could be a lot of times it is within your own family, you know. And so to love your enemies is to have your peace in your family, is to have peace in your city, is to have peace in your nation, and it's to bring peace in the world. The key to peace is not bringing bigger rock to your enemy, is bringing more love to your enemies. It really is. It really, really is.
Professor, I will have some questions. A few questions come back to the history and regarding the importance of the Christianity in North Korea. First, I really wonder how the Pyongyang became a target for missionary. Why they interested to this specific piece of geography of the planet? Why they come to that? Second, when they come to the North Korea or the Korean Peninsula, did they face any challenges and resistance from the local religions? And you know, you just give example of the Japanese Shintoism when you say the Shintoism was the most powerful religions, and maybe the reason that they persecute the Christians, they feared maybe the Christianity is a big religions and one day they can take over their local religions. Did the similar feeling happen to the Korean people at that time? And lastly, as you mentioned before, the missionary mainly I think came from the United States, but later currently is it possible to say the effect of the Christianity is coming from the West, or what about the Russian Christianism, like the Orthodox sections, how they affect to the North Korea's Christianism today? And I forget, sorry, another question: how the Christianity affect to the building of the personality of the Kim family, or did they really get some example from the Christianity or from the from Jesus to build their personal cult?
Yeah. Wait, I have an additional comment about that, because like yeah, you asked a very important question about, you know, personal cult of the personality. I think, yeah, I know the, you know, Chute ideology is actually coming from the biblical worldview. It's kind of, yeah, the Kim Il-sung actually steal the biblical worldview into his ideology. That's why like many kind of like North Koreans, when they like a defect to South Korea, I mean, actually, like I saw that some people like kind of like, because Bible is very similar with the Chute. That's why like, oh my gosh, is this new Chute? Like they're very confused, and some people actually rejected, you know, biblical like a Bible because that's really similar with kind of like a Chute. And yeah, that is kind of like, yeah, one of the aspects kind of like North Korean people struggle to something, understand the something essence of the Christianity, because it's very similar was, Chuche idols and, cult of the personality in North Korea. As I saw, that would be great for the Professor Chan to provide this perspective to the audience.
Professor, just before start, allow me just give you an example for you. Maybe it help you to connect some other dots from the world. In Libya, I'm not sure to what extent you are familiar with the Muammar Gaddafi and Libya. He wrote a book. It's called the Green Book, and many scholars lately they arguing that this book is a kind of, I think, similar to Jushi, and impose on the people in the time to follow. It's almost in the power of the Quran in Libya at that time, but it's mainly, I think, they take the copy from the Quran and just transform some parts to its interest and personality, and then impose on people, and it became like a guiding, for the government institutions and for the people. And maybe it can help you to compare the Jewish idea and the Christianism, how they affected by Christianism, and other examples around the world.
So are you saying that Libya has manipulated Quran and Islam similar to how North Korea did it?
The leader Gaddafi, I think he wrote with his own hand. He wrote a book. It's called the Green Book. And this book was like, I think, similar to Jewish idea, but the main idea of these books coming maybe similar to the Quran, but of course the things are different and working in the interest of the leader.
Okay. Now I'm not familiar enough to be able to say that one, but I can definitely address your earlier questions. And maybe as I do that, you can sort of help to explain the Libya situation in the Dream Book. But one, Pyongyang was not the main target. So even in Korea, when missionaries wanted to go to China and Japan, but then they saw that they were not as receptive, so they came to Korea. But when they came to Korea, the main place that they targeted was Seoul, not Pyongyang. So Seoul and Pyongyang, today Seoul is the capital of South Korea, and Pyongyang is the capital of North Korea. So, and they're not very far apart. If you drive a car, it's like an hour, maybe 1 to 2 hours you can get there. But Pyongyang became the spot, because even though most missionaries started out in Seoul, but Pyongyang became the place because, remember, the 1907 Pyongyang revival. So that really just blew up. Okay. Now, was there resistance? Of course, there was resistance. They didn't like Western missionaries. So if you came to when Western missionaries first came in the 1800s, the Protestant missionaries, when Western missionaries came who were Catholics, many of them were martyred. Now we have Protestant missionaries coming, and same thing could have happened to the Protestant missionaries. So in the late 1800s, Protestant missionaries from the West, many from the USA, were persecuted. There's a person named Samuel Moffat who's very famous. So there's Horace Underwood, and he focuses on Seoul, but Samuel Moffat focuses on Pyongyang, and that would be like a frontier. Seoul is where the city is a lot more, let's say, it's the center of Korea at that time. And the missionaries are working out of that center, but then like Samuel Moffat is working out of Pyongyang, and I want to see if I can, we can talk about Joseon An Chang-ho, but Joseon An Chang-ho is from Pyongyang, from that area, and so there was resistance, and so like when they saw Western missionaries, they didn't say, "Oh, please preach us to the gospel." It really started happening after really Japanese took over Korea in 1905. So with when the Protectorate Treaty happened, and the Japanese government wouldn't allow Koreans to have their own army, and would start taking away different things from the Korean people. They're like, we need help. And they found Western missionaries as their friend. And so these are the regular Korean people. Okay. Now, I think there was another question related to, let me see. Let's see, one, two, what was the third? Missionaries coming from the USA. So missionaries coming from the USA. So, and I have a lot of information on how missionaries, especially Protestant missionaries, spread all around the world, especially in the 1800s, to the current, to the present, because that's part of my dissertation, PhD studies. But just talking about USA, most missionaries, Protestant missionaries, actually came from Europe, especially Western Europe. But then as Christianity started growing in the United States in the 1800s, and in the United States, there was spiritual revival that was taking place. And specifically, there's a movement called Student Volunteer Movement in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, when college students in the United States committed themselves to taking the gospel and going out to the nations as missionaries. And so many of the missionaries that came from the United States and came to Korea, not South Korea only, but to Korea at the time, they were part of the United States Student Volunteer Movement. They sent out these missionaries. So for example, Horace Underwood, and they're coming from the best universities, because in the 1800s, like the Ivy League schools, many of them were part of the Student Volunteer Movement. And they went out to the nations, and they were doing Christian work. Many of them went to Asia, and then many of them came to Korea specifically. Now, the last question in return to the Orthodox Church, that's interesting, because Orthodox Church, I don't have as much knowledge of them, but Orthodox Church travel more like more closely with colonialism. It's sort of like Roman Catholicism traveling very close with colonialism. So as the governments went, religions went together with them. So let's say, for example, when South America was opening up to Europe in the 1500s, 1600s, many of the nations of Europe would go to South America, and Catholicism just naturally went together. And that's how I think, probably that Orthodox would have traveled. But this is interesting. Ready? In North Korea, there is an Orthodox church, official government church. That's an Orthodox church. So there is enough presence, and the North Korean government found enough people to say, yep, we have Christians who are from the Orthodox Church. And so they invited the Orthodox Church to build a church in Pyongyang. And so, yeah. And then, and as far as idolatry, that's a very complicated question, because once again, you cannot look at history just from what's happening right now. What's happening right now is one part of history. But if you want to do a fair reading of history, you have to look at what happened in different periods. So yes, right now, idolatry is very strong in North Korea. But that was not always the case. Kim Il-sung, when he first started out in the 1940s, he didn't say, hey, worship me as your God. That would have been crazy. No one would have accepted that. But then when Kim Jong-il wanted to be the next successor, he's the one who really pushed the worship of his father, Kim Il-sung. So they call that Kim Il-sung-ism. And then Kim Jong-il tagged along in the Kim Jong-il-ism. The idea of Juche is actually started by Kim Il-sung University president and professor named Hwang Jang-yeop, who was he studied philosophy in Russia. I think I'm correct on that. Okay, but he has this very, very high level education, and so he is actually known for crediting Juche. And the idea of Juche is that we will not rely on outsiders; we will rely on ourselves. And specifically, ourselves is what? Kim Il-sung-ism. We're just going to follow what Kim Il-sung says. And also, historically speaking, right now, are they going to look to China for help, or are they going to look to Russia for help? They said, no, we're not going to look to other countries for help. We're going to just look to ourselves. Juche is reliance on self. And now what Juche did was that you go from philosophy to religion. And that's where the idolatry comes. And so there is a lot of co-opting of Christianity in today's North Korea communism and even Juche. And so, North Koreans, when they have left North Korea and they come to churches in South Korea, they feel like they're back in North Korea. They're like, oh my goodness, we experienced all this, and so like even the hymns, the songs they sing in churches, they feel like they sing the same songs, but instead of worshiping God, they worship Kim Il-sung. So a lot of those things are connected, and so maybe with that, Lokman, maybe if you want to connect it to the Dream Book and Liberia, you can help me with that. But yeah, I mean, it is quite amazing, okay?
Yeah.
How true religion often gets co-opted by people who think they have a lot of power.
Yeah.
And that kind of abuse of religion, that is not the way God's created us. Yeah.
And I think, Professor, the religion has a power of a nuclear weapons. When you misuse it, it becomes...
Actually, it's more powerful than a nuclear weapon. It is more powerful than a nuclear weapon.
More powerful, yes. I'm totally angry. And when you misuse it, it can be, super destructive.
Yeah. No, exactly. No, I agree with you. And nuclear weapon, at least it just, it wipes out that one boom, right? But when you abuse religion, it can go on for generations. It's like a continuous dropping of the nuclear bomb. Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah.
I have actually a question from the YouTube comments. I have two interesting questions you can answer. First, the question is, when people thinking about North Korea, religion really comes to mind. But this is a question: why is the Christianity historical role like overlooked a part of the country story? I think even inside, but even outside, even for us. And second question is, can understand North Korea's religious history improve the diplomatic engagement today? As we have seen the current situations of the US DPRK or even other country. It's very hard to, country to have a diplomatic relations such as US, Japan, South Korea. So do you think religious history is now maybe contributing the diplomatic engagement today?
Oh yeah. So second one's easy for me. Absolutely. But you cannot use religion to do your own bidding. That's the problem. When you do religion to do your own bidding, I'm talking about like push your political agenda. That's not how religion works. Religion, in China, they call it the mandate of heaven. And so whatever heaven wants, that's God to China, okay? And so a good king listens to the mandate of heaven. A bad king or a bad emperor does not. And so if we follow true religion, the idea of loving your enemies the way Jesus taught it, man, that brings peace to everybody. I mean, I don't know anyone who knows Jesus, historically speaking, would say that he's a bad guy. No, they go, he's incredible. He lived an amazing life. And so yeah, absolutely on the second one. But the first one, I think the first question is about Christianity in North Korea. Is that right?
Yes, the history.
Yeah. So once again, that's a good question, because remember, you have to do, like, you can't just say, oh, what's the history of Christianity today, and say that that's the way it's always been. That you can't do that. You have to spread it out. So Kim Il-sung comes to power in 1945. 1950, you go into the Korean War. 1994, Kim Il-sung passes away. 1995 to 98, you have the Great Famine. And then you had Kim Jong-il, who dies. And then in 2011, and then you have Kim Jong-un, who comes to power. All those windows are different of how Christianity is going in and out of North Korea. And so to put it in two blocks is easy. You have old Christians in North Korea before the Great Famine, and you have new Christians following the Great Famine. So the old Christians and new Christians. And I think that, I believe there is actually a lot of New Testament Christianity happening today in North Korea. Because it's very similar to the New Testament church. The Roman government, they're not friends with Christianity. They know where these Christians are meeting. Maybe not like today, not like what North Korea knows today, but they have an idea. But still, they don't want them to just disrupt the country and disrupt their empire. Okay, you can have your little meetings, but if you disrupt it, we're going to bring you to the lion's den, throw you there. And so there's something similar like that. And so this is what I believe. Okay? North Korea, Christianity today in North Korea is growing, but it's growing quietly. And that is I will say this, that's the only way it can grow. It cannot grow loudly. If it does, the government will suppress it. They will put it out. And so they need to keep growing quietly. And even with that, this sounds like a compromise, but don't think of it as a compromise. Respectfully, quietly, respectfully knowing their situation. They have very little political power. They have 100% God on their side, but they have to live in this real world. And they have to take care of their families. They have to take care of their children. And so the North Korean government, they know that. They know that if they want to make them cry out for mercy, in America, they call it, say uncle. Uncle means that I give up, right? They know they can do that. But at the same time, they also know that when you persecute any religion, especially Christianity, what happens is what? You know what happens? It grows. So they don't want to see it grow. They don't mind slow growth, but they don't want fast growth. And it's a very tenuous relationship. And so I would say this: we as Christians outside, if we really care for Christians in North Korea, we really have to be careful how we engage North Korea. We don't want to say stupid things, okay? I hate to be so colloquial, but, we don't, right now, what we want peace in Jerusalem of the East. We do. We don't want nuclear bombs to go off. You know what I'm saying, right? We want peace in the Jerusalem of the East. We do. And I believe, okay, the key to that are the Christians in North Korea. That's number one. And number two is Christians outside. But most Christians outside, when we pray for North Korea, I hate to say this, but they have very little understanding.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to you guys about this. Good intel is so essential. even to not just to like to intelligence gathering, but also to praying. If you don't have good intel and you're praying the wrong way, that's not helpful, right? Especially if you have a large platform and you say things you should be saying, that's not very good. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate those questions, and especially if people want to pray for North Korea, I think we need to do that with understanding. We need to do
Like,
that.
but what do you thinking about, like, for us, like, of course Christians, but even general people, when we talking about the North Korea, more topics like nuclear or like a nuclear arm, something, also security, relationship with China. But why do you think, even for us, like generally, like something history of the Christianity, because so important for talking to the Korean history, but why we overlook this important history?
Well, I would say the same thing, okay? I would say that I don't think it's just North Korea who abuses religion. I actually think same thing about other countries too, including USA. Because their main agenda is not religion. Their main agenda is politics. And they really travel on two different roads, okay? Now, I would say that definitely North Korea's abuse of religion is much, much more. Of course, we can see that from history. And so, but, I think that, we need to, instead of seeing religion, I'm going to talk this about maybe from the USA side. Instead of looking at religion in a, I want to say this well, but I just don't feel like not only we don't understand religion when it comes to North Korea, I don't think we understand the history. Maybe even specifically communism, how communism has just been morphing. And again, a lot of times, my students make the same mistake. Most people think what's happening today is what they've always done. That is never true. In anything in life, what we do today it's not all, we have always done that in the past. And so if you do a good reading of history, you see how your life has been changing. And so I wish they can do a better reading of history, better understanding of the role of religion, and in that way we can have better engagement with North Korea. Really, I think so. And so, yeah, I don't know if this is a good time to talk about Jimmy Carter. Remember, I told you about Jimmy Carter and the importance of good intel, right? President Jimmy Carter. Maybe
yes, please tell us, Professor.
You want me to talk about that?
Yes, please. Our audience maybe will be
because
interested.
to me, most people still don't even talk about this, because you would think Jimmy Carter would have the best intel. He's actually being supported. He's not the president at the time, but he goes to North Korea in 1994. He's not the president, but he's supported by the US government to try to negotiate some kind of peace. And especially with the nuclear problem, the nuclear proliferation problem. But Jimmy Carter had bad intel. They didn't even know who had the power. He was speaking to the wrong person. He thought Kim Il-sung is in his 80s. He's about to pass away. And they think Kim Il-sung has power because maybe they think this is the Asian way. We respect our elders. He's an elder. He's the founder of the country. They have statues of him all over the country. There's more than 40,000 statues of him everywhere. It was like, now I understand why they might have done that, because, maybe from their quick gathering, they thought that was true. But and I told you this, guys, okay? Like in North Korea, it's like they have actually political parties. And at that time, the two clear political party was that the party that supported Kim Il-sung, the party that supported Kim Jong-il, his son, the father and the son, right? And at the beginning, father was a lot more powerful. So the people who worked at their office a lot more powerful. And then, you know what? As the son's party became more powerful, and this office became less powerful, over here, this office knew that. And you know what? It's not only the offices know who's more powerful, it's the people. First, it's the elite people of North Korea. That's like 5 to 10% of North Korea. And most of them live in Pyongyang. And they know which side to get behind. It's like the stock market. Who do you get behind, right? And then as the elite people know, the regular country people know. Okay. And so so United States was working like easily 10 to 20 years behind in their intel. And they thought they made the best deal ever with Kim Il-sung, because Kim Il-sung said, yeah, we'll stop the nuclear proliferation. Don't do anything with that. I'll meet with the South Korean president. A few weeks later, what happens? He has a heart attack. And then the following year, what happens? Even worse. The whole country is in chaos. It's called the Great Famine, the Arduous March. And so I have a personal friend who went to Pyongyang during that window of the Arduous March. Even in Pyongyang, people were laying on the streets because they were what? Dying of starvation. You can't even protect Pyongyang during the Arduous March. Now imagine how much more difficult it would be if you live out on the villages. Yeah, so good intel is so critical. It's so critical.
Professor, I like history too much, and I want to back to the history again. I really wonder if you go to the before 1940, when the time of the Christianism flourished, how look like the Pyongyang city was that time with strong education? Because at the beginning, as I mentioned, the people in Tokyo and Shanghai, they sent their kids for education in Pyongyang. Is it because of the role of the Christianity growing in the city, and they really invested too much to education, and the education was very nice and much better than their neighbors? Is it, or other things? I wonder how the architecture, the infrastructure, and the art, science that come with the Christianity and affect the Korean developments.
Yeah, so I'm gonna split this up into what I call it Jesus Christianity. Okay, and Jesus Christianity is when you're really trying to do Christianity like Jesus. And so there was actually a lot of that happening in Korea. You know, missionaries who could have lived comfortable lives here in the United States, but the students are, graduated from some of the best universities here in the United States, but then they said, we want to be missionaries. That was not a small sacrifice. That was a huge sacrifice. And then when they went to Korea, they were not like, hey, thank you for coming to Hermit Nation. We love you. No, they were persecuted initially. But then when in the 1900s, early 1900s, as Christianity is just booming in Jerusalem, and then you have the 1907 revival, and Christianity is well received by the Korean people in general, it was amazing. Because Korean people, I'll give you another example. So the Korean people, for the most of their most of their existence, their writing was Chinese, writing Chinese characters. But the missionary said, you can use your Korean characters. So what we write today in Korea is Korean characters. And when they were writing in Korean, there was this kind of pride that came. And I call this good pride. Okay, good pride. Like, yes, we don't have to use Chinese characters. We can use our own characters. Another huge one is this, and this is really, so they translated the Bible in Korean characters. And so Korean alphabet became very popular. And the missionaries did this. Another huge thing that missionaries did was actually, this is especially all along the line behind education. But education and spirituality, they're not like religion. It's not that very separated. But, like women, Korea was a traditional country, East Asian country. Women were not very high. Women were more like people who just gave babies. And then husband, like men, they had multiple wives. That was normal back then. But the missionaries gave women this kind of dignity, says, no, they're just just as much human as men. And they gave them names. They weren't just the mom of so-and-so or husband of so-and-so. They had their own names. So the women loved Christianity. And in fact, women were more attracted to Korean women were more attracted to Christianity. Okay.
That's so interesting.
And men, because they're like finding new life in it. And you know what? Another one is this. This is interesting. Not only women are very attractive, Korean women are attracted to Christianity, but also these independent fighters like An Chang-ho, Syngman Rhee, these people that a lot of people know, they were Christians, but they were ahead of the independence movement. So when they did the 1919 March 1st independence movement, right, during that time, half the signers of that were Christians, even though the population of Korea is not 50% Christians. Many of the independent people who were fighting for independence in Korea, and many of them became Christians. So maybe I want to bring in An Chang-ho because I love him so much. But An Chang-ho, when he saw that Korea was taken over by Japan in 1905, that really broke him. So in 1907, he comes back from San Francisco, from United States. He's in the United States. He went to the United States in 1904. 1907, he comes back to Korea to really help Korea to be a free country. He's an independent fighter. Now, he works with one of the first groups he works closely with is a church pastor in Seoul. And they started a group called Shinminhwae. So most Koreans who know the Korean history know Shinminhwae. That was probably the most important group early on to fight for freedom in Korea. Shinminhwae. Shinminhwae means New People Society. Shinminhwae. And so Christianity, oh man, I'm telling you, early on, Christianity was so well received in Japan is watching it. But remember, I told you, they had windows when persecution happened, but the big ones started happening in the 1930s and on. And especially when you get to the late, they just started kicking out the missionaries and they said, forget, we don't want Western Christians in Korea or Western missionaries in Korea.
Yeah. That's so interesting because if you go to the Independence Square in South Korea, actually there is architecture like a symbolizing the independence. Actually, the architecture is a female. It's so interesting, and like my friend was so inspired by that. Wow, many women were lead this movement for Korea, and like I'm so happy to hear like like a missionary inspired of feminism because the
word feminism, you can use that in different ways, but when you talk about rights of all humans, including women, God wants that. The missionaries wanted that because they knew that God wanted that. That's a clear teaching of the Bible.
Rights of the women it's
absolutely.
so inspirational because I'm a woman. It's like, wow, rights for women, right?
Even today, if you go to especially an early morning prayer, because Korea is known for early morning prayer. If you go to early morning prayer, easily 70-80% are women.
women
So,
are strong. Yeah, Korean women are
Christianity,
strong.
yeah, Christianity, more specifically, you should say women Korean Christianity that
Yeah,
really kept, Korea
yeah,
on fire in the early 1900s.
yeah, true.
But Professor Tim, there is another important aspect: how Christianity affect the independence. We're talking about the Japanese, Chinese, Russian wars on the Korean soil. How this missionary, or in terms of the character and nationalism, how Christianity contribute to the local people to fight for their country. And I also wonder, for example, when Korea and Japan in war, how the Christian brothers and sisters in Japan, they look at to their brothers and sisters on the Korean Peninsula. Did they help them, or did they remain with their government?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very, very hard question because, what comes first, Christianity, your religion, or nationalism, your commitment to your nation? And so you're going to have a little bit of everything there. Okay. So those who are very, very committed to Christianity, and those who are very committed to the other side, your nation. And I would say that, and there's also some people who have a balance of the two. Okay. Now, let me just sort of start on this a little bit of a higher level. Okay. Even missionaries had to deal with this. So you have missionaries in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, who are from the West and they're in Japan. And then you have these who are in Korea. So you have these Western missionaries in this window in these two countries. And even for them, as I'm looking through the information on and these different missionaries, their loyalty, like if you're a missionary in Japan and you're from the West, you support the Japanese government. And you can see the same thing happening if you're Western missionaries. You're from the West, and you're a missionary, and you're in Korea. You support the Korean government. And so I was tracking that, and then even if you're all part of the same denomination, let's say you're all Methodists or you're all Presbyterians, and there's even like politicking among the missionaries to support the country that they're part of. Now you're asking something that so early on, it was harder to just clearly say the Japanese were on the wrong side for the missionaries. But in 1919, March 1st independence movement, that made it clear Japan was on the wrong side. So the missionaries are now speaking up saying that was wrong because they literally saw thousands of people die during that time. So now, because missionaries, for the most part, they don't want to be involved in politics. They try to distance themselves to politics and they want to just focus on religion. But there's a number of articles written by missionaries because they saw it themselves. And now even the missionaries, Western missionaries who are in Japan, they're going to agree with missionaries in Korea saying, yeah, you saw it with your own eyes. That was wrong. And so now what Japan has to do is the government has to back away and be nice to Korea again. So this is all posturing in politics. And so now you're talking there. If you want to go to another level of talking about people, not the missionaries, the local people, the Japanese Christians versus the Korean Christians, that again difficult. Okay, but I will say this in general. Okay, from what I understand of Japanese Christians, remember I told you about Jesus Christianity, right? Those who really want to follow Jesus. Those who really want to follow Jesus, and I think there are some examples of this in Japan. They were against the Japanese government, what they were doing against Korea. They were. And for them, they wanted to support Korea, but at the same time, it's not easy to do that. It's not same kind of like oppression you would feel if you were in North Korea today, but still, I mean, if you go against your own government, it's not easy. I would say it's the same thing here in the United States. You go against your own government, your life is not going to be made more easier. It's going to be the opposite. And so, and then the opposite side is this. Ready? You have Korean Christians during the Japanese occupation. Korean Christians, but now I'm going to say the opposite is that some of these Korean Christians are sellouts. They have no desire to follow Jesus Christianity. Instead, they just use religion to help themselves. So let's say, for example, Joseon Anchang-ho. I'm going to tell you, this is huge history, okay? So there's 2 assassins that South Korea, not just South Korea, it's all of Korea, including North Korea, they celebrate. One of them is called An Jung-gun. And An Jung-gun, he assassinated Ito Hirobumi in 1909. So South Korea just recently made a movie about him called Harbin. Harbin is a city in China, and that's where the assassination happened. It is a huge blockbuster movie. So when people talk about the 1909 assassination of Ito Hirobumi, right? For Koreans, he is a national hero. Now, Ito Hirobumi actually met with An Chang-ho. When An Chang-ho came from United States in 1907, Ito Hirobumi met with him because Ito Hirobumi wanted An Chang-ho to work with him to make Korea a better country. He says, let's make Korea strong. Okay. And I'm going to, I mean, this may not go over too well with some Korean people, but the governors that ruled Korea, they're not all on the same level of, I'm going to say, like this kind of like just evil governor. Ito Hirobumi was more on the reasonable side, actually, from what I understand. Okay. Now I'll probably get some pushback on that, but compared to definitely, listen, look, early 1900s to 1930s is very different Korea under the Japanese occupation. Within that, within the 20, 25 years, it's not the same. And those guys were out, I mean, incredibly, just, it was like just some really just like Nazi Germany kind of evil things happened in the 1930s. But going back to that meeting that An Chang-ho had, An Chang-ho actually had a number of Korean Christians saying, you should do it. Work with Ito Hirobumi. That would have pushed An Chang-ho's status to another level. Because Japan they own Korea. They have the Protectorate Treaty. And the governor is saying to An Chang-ho, you work with me. He would have no financial problems. He would be instantly on the top of the highest, and there were many Koreans who worked together with the Japanese government. And many of these Korean friends, An Chang-ho's friends, were saying, yeah, you should do it. But An Chang-ho said, no, I'm not going to do that. Think about that. Think about the heart of that, okay? Instead of choosing the easy path, he continued to choose people over his own personal success. That makes An Chang-ho so different from so many people. I cannot say enough about An Chang-ho, okay? But just going back, there are a number of Korean Christians in the early 1900s. I would say did not care really about true Christianity or Jesus Christianity, where they were using religion to their own personal biddings. And so you have two extremes on both sides. You have it in Korea. You have good examples and bad examples. And same thing, you would have good examples and bad examples in Japan with Japanese Christians.
Professor, just coming to the modern time and maybe close to the final of our show today, the Korean, not today, in the past, the Korean Peninsula has always occupied important place in terms of the politics, strategy, war, innovation, tech, culture. Really, the Korean Peninsula and the Korean people are very unique in terms of the international affairs and geopolitics. And today, as you know much better than me and Grace also, there is many North Korean expert, Korean expert. We want to understand and learn from you. To what extent this expert has a strong religious Christianity in the Korean background, historical background, because I focused on the modern side, contemporary side of the South-North relations, and the many articles that I read, I saw that the much of them are built based on some national security strategy of US or national security strategy of Japan or South Korea, or how China relations with the South and North are growing or declining. But I think this part of the historical and specifically the Christianity part are always overlooked when we come to the Korean Peninsula express. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Really, we want to understand from you how, in terms of the diplomacy, to understand the Korean diplomacy in North and South, how this time period and the religious effect is important. Because if we little bit deep digging, we can see that the Kim family also coming from the Christianity, and of course maybe there is some strong effects of Christianity still can be visible on the Juicy idea, on the negotiation terms when the Korean joining negotiation with US or South Korea. Of course, there will be some important sign. What will be your response? And Grace, what will be your comments and questions addition?
Oh yeah, I have the addition like I think cover your questions kind of like do you have I think many policy makers also watching this live stream like from because you say religion is important and we also talking about religion is much bigger than the nuclear, right? And like religion philosophy decide the destiny of the our lives. So my question is kind of what lessons can like policy makers learn from the Korea's religious history when thinking about the future of the Korean Peninsula and the regional stability?
Yeah, I think this is an excellent question, especially as we're trying to do some takeaway from our meeting. So I think that if you're gonna do a study of history, you have to be able to, if you're gonna do it well, you have to do what's called contextual history. Really understand what's happening in that window, in that period, what is actually happening on the ground. That's good intel, okay? And so the role of religion is humongous. So that wasn't only true in the past, and that is not only true today, it's going to be true for already, and I'm going to make a very large statement, for all eternity. Because I believe God has made all of us to be religious. Okay? Because religion is about looking to God and following the mandate of heaven. Okay? Now, And so with that, more specifically, from that, that's how we know are right or wrong, because you get that from the mandate of heaven. Okay, so to really understand religion and understand how that is in and out of these different historical contexts is so critical. Now, specifically looking at Korea, because right now in Korea, especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s, even today, Christianity is huge. It has played it's such a major player. And I am going to predict, okay, on this show, okay, I want it to be earlier, okay, but 5 to 10 years, maybe even before 5, the Korea situation is not going to be the same. Now, I think it can go in 2 directions. It can go better or worse. And so what I'm hoping, is that it will not go worse. Okay. I'm hoping that it'll go better. And Christianity could help to bring unity and for us to understand really what is one Korea. With that, I want to just take a quick break because I need to get my my computer charger, okay? Because I saw my battery saying it's running low.
Okay.
Okay.
That be okay? Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, please. Okay, please.
Okay.
Yes, Grace, just before joining the show, I searched on the YouTube, and I think these live streams will be one of the longest live stream on this topic, specifically on this Christianity in North Korea. I think this will make the show foundational for researchers.
Yeah, I think of course, like this live stream is it was long. However, it is very meaningful to understand the origin of Korea. And as the professor say, I also believe that I agree with that, within 10 years, 20 years, I think the situation will be different. I don't know either, better or worse. But that's why now I think this series is so important to give to the, people, like an audience, to more understand the importance of the Korean Peninsula and its geopolitics. So, do you have an additional comment of the professor?
Let me allow me, please. This is very important point. When we read the articles regarding the unifications and Korea, I think majority of these arguments or claims, they believe that the unification is almost impossible. But the case now you and Professor did here, the Christianity can be a hope for unification of the Korean Peninsula, is really striking and very interesting idea.
Yeah, I think especially the philosophy of the Christianity is important because loving your enemy is the most profound principle. I mean, even you are not Christian, respect the others, loving the others and forgiving the others I believe that is the fundamental principle of the all humanity. So if unification happen in the future, like North and South Korean has to have the compassion for each other because we are so different because of the division of the 80 years. But I also believe God is a philosophy, and like we are and as a Christian, I am myself as a Christian, we are the philosophical and the religious people. It's not about, not using, not abusing the religion itself, because this is actions, loving others. So that's why I believe Christianity. Maybe people misunderstand, Christianity. So do you mean religion can help? I don't believe like religious institution help our unification, but I believe Jesus' philosophy and religious philosophy as the fundamental principle to love others, forgiving others, respecting the others. I believe, our country's future within the idea, I believe our future will be significantly changed. So yeah, that's my perspective. So
Yes, Professor. Welcome back again.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. Okay, so going back to the idea of one Korea and it could be better or worse, and actually that 5 to 10 years might have been. We may even shorten that to 3 to 5 years because right now, one thing that is true about history is that it never stays constant. And so we're going to have some major changes. Okay. And right now I'm looking at the Korean Peninsula. And so, and I believe that religion, if you can understand that in its pure form, it could be so helpful for geopolitics. Because religion, I told you one word with freedom, right? I do. I think God has made us free. He's given us ability to choose, let's say, righteousness or wickedness. He said, go ahead, you get to choose. So we have freedom. 2, I think if you really understand religion in its essence, you understand already unity. Without unity, you just have chaos. You need unity in your family. You need unity in your business. You need unity in your country. Right now, Korea being divided, that is a smack in the Korean Peninsula's face, saying, no, 38th parallel, you are divided. Okay? So another one with religion that I want to highlight, besides freedom, unity, it's ready, it's peace. I'm going to quote the Bible here because Jesus said, I have come to give you life and to give it to you abundantly. Oh, the Bible is so full of peace, shalom, right? Peace. Not only in the Old Testament, but the New Testament. And God wants that. I really do believe that God wants that for Korea. Freedom, unity, and peace. And I believe, and I don't know, and when that unification happens, okay, because it will happen, whether it's for the better or for worse, it's going to happen, okay? Economically speaking, the part of the Korea that's going to take off is North Korea because they have so much to develop. And so one day, I don't know how soon that will be, that this might be 10, 20 years or 30 or 40 years, North Korea will be much more advanced than South Korea. One day. But to get to a place of freedom, unity, and peace, and I think this is where we are trying to lay the groundwork because Korean Peninsula is so important because I want to talk about this even in the larger context, not just Korea. Because Japan and Taiwan, there's a lot of tension there. And historically speaking, Korea has a lot of tension with Japan. But imagine having a new East Asia where there is actually peace here. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Not peace that's good for maybe a few years and then you go into chaos, but peace that could be long-term. And they can use Korea as a case study. If Korea can be united and bring peace, why can't we here in East Asia be more united and have peace?
Grace, anything from you? Professor, just there is a few questions from audiences, but too much. I will just ask in one question general that is about the Chiang Kai-shek relations. There was questions about the Juche. There is questions about yes, there is too much really. It's impossible to bring all them because we passed. Just in general, will you have? Let me phrase the questions. How Christianity help to internationalize of the domestic affairs of the Korean Peninsula in South Korea and North Korea in in good way or in wrong way?
All right, I'm going to talk about another part about Christianity, and I can couch it in the larger context of true religion, okay? And that is that true Christianity stands shoulder to shoulder with the poor. So what I'm saying is that, when you look at the ministry of Jesus, you look at life of Jesus, he loved the poor. So let's say, for example, prostitutes. They were the outcast of the outcast, right? But he had prostitutes, he had tax collectors. He was actually the toughest on the religious leaders because he saw their hypocrisy. Okay. Now, going back to your question, because if you're really going to practice true Christianity, true religion, you have to take care of the poor in your country.
Yes.
And with that, let's say, for example, right now in South Korea, we talk about these wealthy people who are doing very well financially, but there's still a lot of people in South Korea that are poor. And I'm thinking of two groups specifically. One would be North Korean refugees. Their lives are not easy in South Korea. Two, there's actually a lot of foreigners who are coming to South Korea and working. And the reason they come there is because they can make more money in South Korea than the country they're from. And so imagine, and then also just South Koreans themselves, because there's still many South Koreans who are very poor living in some of the smaller villages. And so imagine South Korea really doing good for the poor. And then in North Korea, we have basically most of North Korea is poor. You have the 5 to 10% who are elite. I met people when I was in China. I met people who were from Pyongyang. They would sell their house in North Korea, in Pyongyang, use that money to get a visa to come to China. They came legally. And I would meet and talk to them. And I met another person who came from a village side. And when they sold their house in village side, it's like 1/10 of the house that was in Pyongyang. And they also came to China because this is an investment for them. And they're trying to have better lives. But then I started thinking, I'm like, the ones who are coming to China today, I'm not talking about during the Great Famine, today, these are actually more like smart, clever, like more like good in business. People who can bring money together to come to China. They have the resources, and so they're able to, because this is it's in a business adventure for them, and so I talked to them, given the historical context, but most of North Korea are not like people who can come to China and make more money. Most of North Korean people are trapped in that country. And so people in Pyongyang, even some of the people in Pyongyang, they escape because it's not because of finances. That's not their problem. They have enough money. The reason they escape is because they don't have freedom. And so Christianity is so good for everybody because Christianity doesn't respect you more because you have more money. Christianity respects everybody regardless of how big your bank account is. And in fact, it's the opposite. Christianity pays more attention to those who are poor, who have no money in their bank account. And I think Christian, like when I talk about peace, right? Peace cannot be just because I hear a lot of people talking about peace, okay? But peace cannot be just something you say as your religion. That's what the hypocrites did, that Jesus rebuked. No, we don't just say that because it's part of our religion. We say that because that's part of my mandate as a human being. If I have more, I have to give more. That's it. That's what God did. He has a lot, so he gave a lot. And that's the way, life of righteousness that I believe Scripture teaches. And so imagine a place, okay? I feel like I'm writing a song. Imagine a place where we really, really take Christianity to heart and say, you know what? That's right. No, Dr. Chang is not saying something that I think it's so radical. No, this is just common sense. If you have more, you got to give more. You're like, well, that sounds like, this kind of radical socialism. No, this is just common sense. We're not going to put a gun to your head and say you have to give things away. No, but it's just common sense. And so, and so just, like in the book, let's say, for example, in Acts chapter 2 in the Bible, it talks about the first Christian church. That's what the first Christian church did. They did common sense. They helped each other. They didn't just grow their own bank account, but they helped others who didn't have any money in their bank account. And so there was no poor among them. Wouldn't that be great? If we practice that, no poor among us. If we do that in Korea, and then other countries say, hey, we can do the same thing. Of course you can do the same thing. Because that's how God created us. To have no poor among us. I hope I didn't sound like a radical socialist on that. But I believe that's part of the mandate of heaven. I do. The more you have, the more you got to give. You know? And I'm not trying to get political. This is not a political statement. I believe this is a religious statement. I do. Yeah.
Amen. Amen.
Yes, Grace. You can maybe ask your last comment or last questions. From my side, really, I appreciate Dr. Tim's time and his knowledge. Really, he gives some good idea. And just I told Grace, Professor Tim, before this shows, I searched on YouTube. There is no equal format of this topic and this show specifically. I think there is no any other document or something like that similar to talking about the role of Christianity in North Korea, the Pyongyang as the Jerusalem of the East. This is very amazing. Really, I appreciate your kindness once again. And Grace, what will we say? What will be your last comments or?
I don't know, but thank you so much, Professor. Also, thank you so much to sharing the Christian perspective. Heaven starts from the poor. Actually, that is one of the reasons why I become Christian. Actually, I was not Christian before, and I was very hypocritical about religions and church themselves. But I knew heaven starts from the poor. And as a Christian, I need to serve the poor. I believe that is the, most important things, being Christians, to fully love in God's spirit. So even now, North Korea is really, we struggle. They struggle a lot, and then South Korea, North Korea, we still divided. But I know, one day, we will see the peace and peace, unity, and the growth and the prosperity for our future. But for that, like a spirit of the serving the poor, heaven starts from the poor. And even now, even you, here's everyone, even audience, everyone, you are actually already invited in God's kingdoms. So this is kind of my personal reflection, but for the maybe wrapping up, so this live stream, so understanding these histories help us move beyond the headlines and better understand the complex reality of North Korea, as well as the broader geopolitical dynamics of the region. So today, Professor Jam, thank you so much for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. We truly appreciate your time and the perspective. I really enjoy it. And thank you for everyone to join us today. So we hope today's discussion has given you a deeper understanding of how history, religion, and the geopolitics intersect on the Korean Peninsula. We look forward to seeing you at our next live stream. Take care of yourself, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. once again. We appreciate your kindness, and I hope in the future we can host you again on this live stream. The topic really amazing.
You really
And
like it?
yes, I like it because there is no
Yeah.
equal shows available on online platform. The most live streams or video records or debates on North
Mm-hmm.
Korea is just about the contemporary time. And I saw
Mm-hmm.
there is several videos on Christianity regarding the North Korea, but they are limitation. They are very limited to some maybe 10 minutes or 30 minutes like that, and even they don't go deep as much as in this conversation, Professor go. And thank you very much, Professor. Also, I appreciate our followers and subscribers who watch us and join us until end of the show. Please subscribe to the channel, and on 38 parallel you can see on every Saturday 8 p.m. Korean time. Please come with your questions, your comments, and apologize also we couldn't bring your questions that time because the topic is really unique and the format was became so long. We are now around 2 hours 50 minutes, but please follow us. We will bring high quality experts, and we will bring different things than in mainstream media or in other live streams. Thank you very much again. Have a good night, good day, and good evening for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you, Professor Tim.
Thank
Thank you.
you.